liberty, and justice for all. First up are the minutes for January 13. And somehow, I don't know how you did it, but you got all the percentages right except one. At least as I saw it, which is on page 5 of 5. And it says, yep, 13.8, and I think it should be 10.3. And I can show you that if you want.
Which budget was it?
Yes.
Yeah, debt service was. Well, it depends, Jack, if it's, there's two parts to debt service. So there's debt service principal, then debt service interest. So the 10.3 was principal. The 13.87 was total debt service. So I don't know which one you were referring to, Michelle. The total.
Oh, you do? Okay.
So that one would be 13.87.
No amendment then. Any other comments or suggestions about the minutes for January 13? If not, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. One abstention. Next up are the select board comments. Jen, do you have anything other than the warrant articles for us from the select board?
I don't believe so.
Okay, let's do the warrant articles now. And Wayne is here, so he's probably been in a truck for several hours. Let's do the two highway items first, if we can.
Sure. Do you want Wayne to speak to them and just have him come up?
If there are any questions, he can respond to them. Do you want to speak to them, Wayne? Okay.
So this is Article 4 and Article 5.
What do you want?
So Article 4 is the front end loader, and maybe I can give the summary, Wayne, and then you can kind of answer if there's any questions. So our almost 23-year-old front end loader has malfunctioned, and there's been multiple attempts to fix it. We thought we had exhausted, per Wayne, all the attempts to fix that machine, although we did learn last week that there might be one last ditch effort for us to fix that machine. So the conversation that we had at Select Board was we would put a warrant on there as a placeholder, and if Wayne finds before either the budget hearing or town meeting itself that we are going to be able to fix our existing machine, that the Select Board would ask to pull that warrant as not needed. But we felt that we had to at least put something on there. The other discussion we had last week is that there is some potential for us to lease a front end loader for a 3, 5, up to 7-year lease, and we could put a lease warrant on, but we just didn't have the time to work out which company, which lease, which interest rate. This time just got very tight on this issue since we just learned about this a few weeks ago. And so we didn't feel that we had the numbers ready to build that warrant. So we still have some potential that if we decided we did in fact need a new machine, but wanted to lease instead of purchase, that would be a much lower dollar value, probably $30,000-$40,000 a year, as opposed to this 190 lump sum. And so that was kind of how we left it. It's not ideal, but it was just due to the very tight time frame that we were left with. So that's sort of the thinking of how we came up with that particular warrant as being written. Warrant 4 for raise up to $190,000. That's probably a little bit more than we need based on the quotes that we got, but that was the number we picked because it covered all of the current bids that we have. So I think I'll pause there and see if the board has questions for me and then specific questions for Wayne.
Can the lease be done within this warrant?
I
Or-
don't think so. I think in general, you can amend a warrant, but you really can't change the intentionality of it. So to change a purchase warrant to a lease warrant, I think I would have to ask counsel who would be there that day, but I think it would be outside of the intentionality. So the thought was that we would probably have to introduce another warrant or would have to just see what we could make do within the current budget or from other funding sources to try to do a lease, which is why just based on the timing, we put it in as a purchase, because that one, at least we knew the ballpark numbers. And for if you're gonna do a multi-year lease, you have to have the specific yearly payments listed out in the warrant. And we just weren't ready for that yet, based on the bids that have just been rolling in.
So if it comes to leasing, then, I mean, we'd need to sort that out before the public hearing?
I would think so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we may just not have time, in which case we would have to either delay a year or Wayne and the select board would have to work to find funding to cover the first year of a lease, if that's what
Okay.
we decide to do. And it's quite possible we could do that from some other mechanisms. And so we had to have at least a starting place for the public to make a decision. And the public may vote this down, and if they do, we'll go to Plan B, or we'll figure out the lease, or we'll have to delay a year. Or maybe we're gonna, I don't know if you have any updates from last week, maybe we're gonna find out we can fix it for more like $15,000, and then this will all be a moot point, and the select board will pull the warrant off for consideration. So maybe I'll turn it over.
Wayne,
to
you have the floor.
I don't know if
Well,
Wayne knows more information since last week.
I can tell you more.
Uh-oh, Wayne's gonna tell us more. Okay, Wayne, lay it on us.
Okay, trying to fix it. I just got the call probably half an hour ago.
Okay,
Is, the guys who were gonna try to get the parts, we got one more shot. We have one more shot at it. It gave me a name and number to call. He's been around and he's been trying to get, prices for this part and try to get it fixed, but he can't get the parts. He even went to John Deere to try to fish him out
yeah,
and check, and John Deere, you definitely ain't gonna get these parts. But there's a name that we gotta call, and they deal with some of these loaders, and they may be able to get the parts. He said he's not sure, but he didn't wanna do it. He turned it over to us to try, so we're gonna try to call Wednesday to see if we can get the parts. He said to take the whole unit out and see if they can just replace the whole part. The whole unit, the whole hydraulic unit, it's pretty good size. And there's a lot of stuff in there that needs to be replaced. It's worn out, it's rusted, and it's not working. So it needs quite a bit of parts. The whole unit, we tried, it was $14,000 for the whole unit. That's what it started out to be for the price. But with John Deere, they told us there was only one in the United States. That's our chance of getting it. And
what's your gut feeling telling you in terms of if we're gonna be able to fix this machine?
I don't think so.
You're not feeling good about it?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think we.
You're still
are.
trying.
Huh?
You're still trying?
We're still trying. We're still trying. We got this one company that they're I don't really know what they're in. He gave me the name and number to call them and do it. And the guys in Exeter now, they fixed theirs, but their tractor is a little different than ours. It's not basically the same.
Okay.
So
still slightly
we're
hopeful, but
still-
not very
right,
hopeful
right.
that we can fix it.
right. And he even checked around in different places where he could get parts.
Okay.
Hasn't done very well.
So Now we're looking at $190,000, and can you tell us how badly you want this item?
Well, this loader, we do a lot with this loader. We do a lot. Now, not saying, we got the loader, but, I mean, worst comes to worst. I got backup with, Chris Beebe called me. I can probably get some backup with some guys around with tractors if we need them. I don't think it's
Like
gonna-
call a friend
Yeah,
situation?
We can, yeah, if we need them, if we get into a big bind. I mean, we use it for everything. It's trees, we get a lot of snow, that's where we're gonna get, if somehow we get a lot of snow with that, the backhoe isn't gonna cut it very well. With that loader, we will.
Yep.
And for anything, like, you know, if anything happens, we depend on that loader, and we use it a lot during the. And also, I forgot to mention in the selectmen's meeting, we use that loader almost every week for down there doing the recycling, with brush, with, it's
At the
better
shed.
than, it's better than trying to do it with a backhoe, because it sits up higher and all the stuff don't land on top of the hood like it does the
Okay.
backhoe, so we really depend on it.
So in a way, it's a safety issue also
It's,
for the workers.
And Jack, replacing this loader was on the CIP for 2029.
Yeah.
The machinery just didn't know that, so got pushed up a couple of years. And so at the select board, you know, we weren't super comfortable with this because it's an unanticipated $190,000 cost, but we did vote to put it on the warrant to just leave it up to the voters, how they felt about it, because it really is their decision.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a question about how this relates to warrant Article 5 about the Highway Vehicles Equipment Purchase Fund. And this seems to be, your Article number 5 is putting away money for, I assume, buying this front-end loader in 2029. And so because
No,
this came earlier,
actually-
or other equipment?
Other
There's a lot
equipment.
of other equipment.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that-
the highway equipment is by far like one of the biggest budget items in our budget. And so if you look at the CIP, Wayne has, in 2026, it was originally there, but it probably will get pushed out. He was hoping to replace the 2006 International Model 7400 truck, which is almost $300,000. So the 150 is for our regular truck replacement. This front-end loader was a completely separate, unanticipated cost that we were hoping that was going to be pushed out into 2029, and we just won't make it.
Well, that's a factor, and that's one of the reasons I was hoping Wayne would be here tonight, because not including the loader, in the next 4 years, we're looking for 2 trucks and the excavator. That's a total of $800,000.
Yep.
So in some way, we need to be putting aside, after the loader, $800,000.
Yeah, I don't
over
think
the next 4
historically the
years.
town was putting enough into that capital reserve fund
Yeah.
because it was completely drained last year to allow Wayne to purchase the one new truck.
Yeah, there's less than $9,000 in it now, so.
Correct. So Wayne, let's say the public doesn't have the stomach for both of these warrants. What do you think if you're given those questions at town meeting? Are you feeling like we can squeak a little bit more time out of the 2006 truck? Like, how's that truck working?
The truck is running, it's running fairly well. We use it every storm, that truck.
Okay.
The truck does need some front-end work. It's gotta have some front-end work done and some other small things in it that has to be done, but it's 2006 and we're kind of going in the same boat as we are with the loader with that truck because of the year. You
For
might get
parts.
parts, you might not get
Sure,
parts.
sure.
But we're in the same boat. So when we lose that truck, we're losing our 4th truck. If we lose the 4th truck, then we're gonna be in trouble. Because we definitely need to keep up 4 trucks. And within the next year or so, we're probably gonna need the 5th one, because we got
Some new roads.
the new roads coming.
Mhm.
We,
And I think I heard you say that if the town is not in favor of both of these warrants and maybe doesn't pass the front end loader, that you potentially would have a plan B of
Yeah,
calling
we'll-
for help from another town if we were really in a jam.
We'll have to go
Okay.
to Plan B.
Okay.
No matter what, we'll have to go to Plan B, get some guys with got equipment and pay them to come in and do something, I would think.
Gotcha.
We've done that, we did that the first year that I was here. Had a couple guys that we had to do that and try to get them.
Other questions or comments from the committee? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Oh, second.
We have a motion and a second, and our habit is, before we vote, to open it for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make a public comment concerning purchase front-end loader?
Just make sure you turn on the microphone there and just kind of talk into it there. Thanks.
Brett Ramsdale, 351 South Road. I do have a question as far as, I'm hearing the conversation about, we'll put the warrant article out there, see if the public has a stomach for it. Doesn't it come with a recommendation? So
Yeah.
is the select board going to recommend this to the
The
town?
select board already has, yes. This is the BudCom deciding tonight if they also will recommend it or how they will vote.
Well, as I hear it, it's like, it's almost wishy-washy. Let's see what the town has a stomach for. I mean, we gotta be strong on this. Are we want it or do we not want it?
Yeah, I think the select board was pretty strong that when our head of highway tells us that they use this every day and he really needs it and he doesn't think he could fix it, the select board absolutely supports this, and I think it got a unanimous 5-0 vote.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's a big ask for the public, an unanticipated cost, and at the end of the day, they're the ones that decide. But yeah, we voted unanimously in support of this at select board.
And Wayne, the 2003 truck, you said it had 56,000 miles on it?
The 2006?
2006?
Yeah.
How many miles does it have?
Sounds right.
What a low figure.
2006, it's got 56,393
I mean,
miles.
it doesn't sound like a lot of miles. These trucks are built for this.
Well, it ain't the miles, It's out there. These trucks are in salt all the
Right.
time.
I mean, they're built to plow.
Yep, they're built to.
I would think
plow.
that 56,000 is
But
not a lot.
also these trucks, we've been having they have been having a lot of problems with international.
Mhm.
The engines in them, I guess they changed the engines or something and stuff been going in there. And these trucks, they're getting wear and tear, they're using them quite a lot.
Now, if you were to get another truck, you trade these in? Do you keep it as a spare? I mean, you talk about if you go down a truck, you're gonna be in tough shape. You know, would we keep this as a spare so we could maybe
Well, I got
hedge in the future of what having to
the,
put up the big expenditures?
The truck, the 2011 truck, we were having a wicked lot of trouble. That was breaking down all the time. And we finally, we got the new truck last year, so we took that, and we've been working on that truck.
Oh, so
Trying-
we
trying
do
to
have a
get
spare.
It is a spare.
Okay.
We got it as a spare. Now, the 2006 is running better than what that truck did. And so far, it's been running at heavy storm this year, and the only thing is the body rusted out in and on that truck, so we had to put just a built-in sander, full sander on that truck, and that's the truck that doesn't have a body now. It has to be put a regular sander on. And that's been working pretty good.
And my last question on the loader, did the gentleman from the Exeter, from the Exeter Town Department that was at the last meeting, is he gonna stop by and take a look at the loader and give his recommendations? Oh, he did?
He's been looking for parts.
Oh, he's the one who's been looking.
He's the one looking for
Okay.
parts, and called me tonight. He's pretty much tied his hands in with that. He turned one company that we got to check with tomorrow, Wednesday. I got to check with him Wednesday to see if they can do anything with that.
Okay.
But he's been around, he even went back to John Deere and questioned them and everything, and they say they got no parts, they got no parts.
Crazy. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
If there's no other public comment, we have a motion and a second.
Can I make a comment, please?
Okay.
I know that people came before the Conservation, Bruce Stevens came before the Conservation Commission and talked about a different way of sanding salting. I don't remember what it's called, some kind of like,
The eco green.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna recommend that we do that. We start doing that in town, if that might help to save some of the abuse on these vehicles. I don't know that it's gonna be a hard thing to start to do, but I think we should move towards that.
She's talking about, you know how the town has started investigating the like green salt initiative?
Like
That's
using
kind of a
less-
separate
yeah.
issue.
It is, but it's just
From the front, the classes that you went to? Yeah, and it's possible, I don't know if there was data on that prolonging the life of the trucks, but I would assume it would if it's lower salt.
can't.
I
wouldn't
think only
think it
one
wouldn't
truck
hurt.
is capable of that.
Only the new truck, I believe, is capable of that, right? Because it has to have a certain programmable technology.
Well, it also would be better for the town and the environment in general. I think we should just move towards that. My other comment, I guess, is we have all these warrant articles that the select board have approved all of them, with an already 8+% increase in the town budget. I would like to think that there might be something, I'm not saying necessarily this article, but something that we could maybe say no to. And I think we as a budget committee need to think very hard about that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for purchase of a front-end loader, $190,000. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right.
No.
And I'm an aye. Next up, Jen.
I think we already basically spoke to Article 5. So this is the standard CRF replenishment. The past, last year it was 150,000, but years prior to that, it had been about 50,000, which obviously, if you look at the CRP, was not really going to get us very close to that $800,000 goal of replacing those multiple vehicles. So after discussion, we elected to once again leave it at 150,000, with the understanding that it would take us at least 2 years at that amount to raise enough to buy one truck. And so we elected we had first had it in the multiple CRF, but we pulled it out because it is once again a slightly higher dollar value. And so it mirrors the warrant that passed last year, which was for $150,000 for the CRF called Highway Vehicles and Equipment Purchases.
What's in that right now?
Like $8,000. Hold on, I'll tell you in 1 second.
8,800.
There you go. Minimal. Because he pulled it out to buy the new truck this year.
So again, on our CIP, we have, in the next 4 years, 2 trucks and an excavator. Estimated cost totally $800,000. So the 150,000 would be a start.
Wayne, do you have any comments about that?
The excavator, that's,
This is the CIP.
as long as the backhoe keeps going, we'll keep going with the backhoe. We won't be asking for a new excavator, but if the backhoe decides to start kicking the bucket, then that's what we thought we would end up doing, is go to an excavator instead of the backhoe. If we have the loader.
Looks like you would put it at 2028 on the CIP.
Oh, yeah, that's to replace that's for the replacement of the cat backhoe, 420. The backhoe is, what is it? The cat is that a 2003? I think it's a 2003 backhoe. But that's running fine right now. Keeping
So
that going.
that's kind of got an asterisk on
Yeah.
it then.
So are
Yeah.
you saying the 420, the Cat 420 is actually the backhoe?
The backhoe.
It's not an excavator?
No, it's not the excavator.
Okay.
We were only talking about if we gonna change the backhoe, that we would try to go with an excavator. An excavator, I mean, we could use an excavator actually better than the backhoe because you could get some attachments, a lot of brush cutting around town and do almost the same thing with a backhoe, as long as we had the loader with the front end loader and work.
So your thought was that if the backhoe
Yeah,
was at the end of life,
the
you
end
would
of life,
replace it with a slightly
right.
different piece of
That's why
machinery?
we're talking about
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Okay.
We're not after that yet.
Okay.
And just to get a sense of, I know the issue with with the loader is that you're having a hard time getting parts, and it seems like the 2006 is having a similar thing where if something were to break, it's hard to get parts. Is the situation any different with the backhoe, just given its age, or is that something where
No,
parts are more readily
Everything's
available?
been good with the backhoe. We've been getting everything we need with that right now, and it's been running.
It's
good.
behaving itself,
We're
it sounds
trying
like.
to-
Oh, well, I was gonna say, is it a situation of just because it's behaving itself, it's
Yeah.
fine, but then if something were to
Some,
break, it's gonna be equally
yeah.
challenging to try to source parts rather than just saying, nope, we have to get a whole new truck or lease a truck.
Would that machine be as equally difficult to find parts for if it started?
Not right
Malfunctioning?
now, we haven't heard anything. We've been.
Okay.
getting
It's not quite as
everything,
old.
so-
Oh, I thought you said it was another 2003, so.
No.
Is it? How old is that machine?
I think it's 2003.
Oh, maybe it is almost as old
Yeah, I
then.
just wasn't sure if, they possibly just.
The
there's
backhoe,
more
do you
of
have it
them,
there?
so- Yeah.
2013. that's right.
13,
Okay.
yeah, I thought it was
Yeah.
newer.
2013.
I was-
Yeah, that's why we're not having the
Yeah.
same parts
Never
issues,
mind.
10 years
That
younger.
makes sense.
And the CIP obviously can be adjusted. So if
Yeah.
Wayne tells us, oh, that machine looks like it's gonna get 10 more years, we can always bump something out on the CIP.
Yeah.
I think the thing you've told us, Wayne, that is less likely to be bumpable is the replacing the 2006 truck and then eventually the dump truck, which is right now in 2029. So that's the two trucks that you're thinking will
Yeah.
need to be replaced in the next
Yeah.
5 years or so. And those are the ones that really just get beat up out on the road.
Any other comments or questions from the committee?
Well, just kind of to the point that Michelle had made earlier with the funding level, that historically, I think you'd said that we were doing 50,000 per year. Now we're looking to increase to 150 to be able, because we'll need like 300 to purchase the next truck scheduled to go. If we might be able to bump some things, to bump the rest of them out now that we might have the new loader, if the public decides to pass that, would there be any benefit to maybe decreasing the amount in that next warrant article down to
I
like
think you-
100?
I think you could. I think how we got into this situation
Yeah,
is it was before I was on the board when some of these were set, how much was going to be put on in this every year. And so last year, for the first time, I had asked our town administrator to actually make like a chart of
Yeah.
like what our target balances is, because the school does that, and I find it is really helpful. And so last year, it was highway vehicles had 130,000 in it, and the target balance was 870,000. And so historically, we'd only been putting 50,000 a year.
Okay.
And I think my gut feeling is we were getting away with underfunding that CRF because our machines were in good shape. And then it's now caught up with us,
okay,
I think. But I can't speak to it. I don't have in front of me what we put in it for the last 15 years. But I know that it historically was more like 50,000. And that's why last year it was a bigger ask for us to put 150 in it. And it was because we needed to make a purchase.
okay.
And so I think we probably historically underfunded that CRF, and we're getting away with it for a while until we weren't.
Yeah. Is that something where when we present the warrant articles that we could, like with the school ones, let people know what the goal funding should look like?
Yeah, actually, we showed
to
this
try
slide
to-
last year
Okay.
at town meeting.
I think
Yeah.
last year.
It's okay. It was a long meeting. But yeah, we
My
did.
brain wasn't.
Yeah, and I think that last year we were already asking for a higher than normal number. So
Okay.
we knew we weren't going to get close to that 870 number, but we really couldn't rationalize asking for a bigger number than that, because that was already 3 times what had been asked for the year
Yeah.
prior. So
Okay.
that's why we kept it at 150, and that got that fund just up to enough to buy the new $300,000 truck that we bought. So now that fund has almost nothing in it
Yeah.
again, compared to our $870,000 goal target balance of that. So it's a tough situation to be in.
All right, yeah, just wanting to
Yeah,
think it out.
absolutely.
I'll make a motion for $150,000 to go into the highway vehicles and equipment purchase CRF. Is there a second?
I can second that, yeah. I feel good about 150.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any visitors that would like to speak to?
Sorry, Jim Michaud. Just a quick question, and maybe go back a little bit too. I know that the loader is passed, but in some of these situations, is it possible to find a good used piece of equipment? I mean, I know there are loaders out there that are a lot less than 190,000 that could give us several years of good service, and trucks as well. Just a thought, rather than going new and spending 300,000, maybe you get 2 trucks for 300,000. Just a thought, but.
One of the ones that Wayne brought to us for a quote actually is used, but it was coming in at 150.
271 hours.
I think that one was around 140, 150. So that's on the table as one of them that we could purchase that has some
Just a way to save
miles on
money.
it. Yep.
That's all. Yeah. Cool. Glad you're looking at it then.
There's no further visitor comment. All in favor for $150,000 for highway vehicles and equipment?
Aye.
I
All right.
Nay.
And I'm an aye.
All right, Wayne, I think you're off the hook.
That's it?
You're off the hook.
Thank you, Wayne.
All right, thank you.
Would it be possible to do rec next?
Sure. The Article 8. So when the select board discussed the rec budget this year, Andy had requested to add a full-time program coordinator, which would replace the current part-time seasonal second person that we have. And the select board advised that rather than putting it into the budget, we felt more comfortable with it being a warrant article. So Andy wrote up a warrant article for us, and the way this warrant article is written, as is usually done for when you're adding a position, it reflects what the total cost would be to hire that person, which is around $62,000, and then further asks to raise and appropriate the actual amount we would just need for this particular calendar year, which is only $26,226. The reason for that is that this person wouldn't be hired until approximately May 1st, so already that's only a part-year salary. And there was already in the budget about $14,000 for that seasonal worker, so we accounted for that as well. So while this position is about a $62,000 a year position, the amount that would be appropriated by voters would be just over $26,000 for this position for the 1 year, 2025. And this was approved by the select board. And Andy, I don't know if you wanted to speak to it or if the board had questions for Andy.
I can wait for questions.
Andy, what would this allow the rec department to do that it's not doing now?
It will allow the rec department to run more efficiently. I mean, there's aspects of the department, participation feedback, program evaluations, kind of just tip of the iceberg things that we're not doing a good job of keeping pace of. And this position is really to maintain and to make the department more efficient with what we are already providing for services and programs.
And this person would take over all the summer camp duties as well, right?
Yeah, so the
Yep.
program coordinator's like main responsibility would be the summer camp and youth programming, but they would assist with general day-to-day tasks in other aspects of the department. But their sole focus would be general day-to-day youth programming and summer camp.
Would you see some new programs introduced with this additional person?
I mean, we've added new programs every year with just the one full-timer. My main goal is to make sure that the department is running more efficiently, but we are always open to adding new programs and/or events that, you know, the community sees fit.
How many hours do you work, Andy?
40 hours a week.
Do you work from home at all?
Partially, but mainly in the office.
Any other questions? Yep.
I have a question that's more of a, I think, procedural, perhaps legal question, is when putting a new position into a warrant article, does it only secure remainder of 2025, the year of 2026? And then that's the only guarantee there is for this individual? Does it have to be?
No, it would go into the budget. So because the first line is that the town would vote to establish the position. And so by doing that, they would essentially give the board permission to move that into the regular budget for the following year, once it has been established. And of course, they can always vote to amend the budget or cut the budget as they see fit, but it would establish that position permanently unless it was revoked or when we decided we no longer needed that position. We wouldn't have to go year to year, just like we don't for any other town employees. Once it's created, it's there.
They're not always, as far as I recall, not usually in warrant articles, positions. So that's why I asked.
We've done this. We actually borrowed the wording of this from the last time we added a full-time police officer. And so we have used this before, and we've heard some comments from folks in town that when there is a new person added to the payroll, that they often like to see that as a standalone warrant rather than in the budget. I think sometimes we do it in the budget, sometimes we do it standalone. This time we felt that this one was reasonable as a standalone, but we felt a little bit differently, like for example, about the deputy for fire, because like we won't have a fire chief without that. So we had felt that there was a little bit more wiggle room to give the public the decision on this position. And the select board did vote to approve this, but that's why we did it as a standalone. And that's my understanding that we've done it before for fire and police the most recently to add. We haven't really added a lot of other employees in the town other than fire and police.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other comments?
My feeling is, I guess I'm not really understanding how many hours it takes to run the rec department. A lot of things are the same programs over and over. So I'm not understanding the need for 2 full-time people in that department.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Of course.
Yeah, so to touch on that, I'm the only full-timer, year-round person in that department. I'm the only person that knows how to do the job. If, God forbid, I am required to be out of the office for any time, there's nothing with the rec department that actually gets done without me being here. And I'm a man that wears many hats. I'm the accounts payable for the department, the facilities coordinator, rentals coordinator. At other departments, you see a youth programmer, adult programmer, a senior programmer, a basketball coordinator, so on and so forth. And I've been running this department for almost 7 years now, all by myself, with adding more programs. When I first started here, we only had the Bunny Breakfast and 4th of July Parade. We've now expanded to Haunted Walks, Fall River Paddles, partnered for Peach Project and National Night Out, so on and so forth. And that's also adding, more programming like lacrosse, cricket. We have a growing senior community here in Brentwood who is asking for more services, hence why we put forward the pickleball courts, and we're hoping to expand more upon that with senior offerings. But as a whole, to run the department, down to the maintenance and the upkeep of the facilities, it's tough for one person to balance all of those and wear those hats, and to also run the department as efficient as possible.
Other questions or comments from the committee? If not, is there a motion? There will be after we,
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. Public comment?
Liz Faria, South Road. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that all employees except for minutes were supposed to be in person at the job and not at home anymore. I thought that was something that Letty put into place. Am I wrong?
No, the select board did do that. I think, I don't know if you're referring to Andy, when there's weather or other events, that's times when Andy's allowed to be remote. If there's a one-off event for weather or holiday, et cetera. Otherwise, all employees are here and not remote.
Except for minute.
The only exception right now is Kip, who we've let be remote on his very last few weeks in the job as he, gradually
Winds down.
tails out.
Okay,
Correct.
I just wanted to clarify.
You're correct in that. Yep.
Excuse me, Liz, you mentioned minutes. What minutes is that?
We had a carve out that would allow certain employees to do minutes at home because when there's interruptions and noise, they can do
Got
it
it.
like 5 times faster.
Okay,
That was the
thank you.
only exception.
Jim, you showed again. It really boggles my mind that we have a town of less than 5,000 people, and we're looking to have 2 people run a rec department. Pretty sure that we've never had to have 2 people before, and I just think that this position warrants 1 person. If you can't do your job, then we should be looking for someone else that can. It's how many people, how many kids are in the town? Do you know?
I mean, not off the top of my head, but I can tell you the number of feet that are hitting our facilities every week, which is close to 1,000. I mean, that's customer service we're providing each and every day, each and every week when people use our facilities. I can refer to other towns within the Rockingham County that are similar demographics and size that have 2 to 3 full-timers. My sole goal and intent is not to add 3, 4, 5 full-timers. I believe 2 people to run this department is more than enough and appropriate.
Does it seem that maybe if we have 1 person that's running the department and you want to add a lot more programs and a lot more things, should we maybe scale that back a little bit so that we just keep you 1 employee and not have to have another employee? I'm not sure that, I just don't see how a town of less than 5,000 people, it would be really great to have, 3 employees, right? And have tons of programs every single day for everybody, but we're a small town.
We're also a unique town. We have a lot of spillover effect from other surrounding communities that don't have a rec department, so we service them through camps, sports, and other programming. We offer a lot of our senior events or programs at no cost.
Do we charge those other places to have them
Charge
come in?
resident and non-resident fees, yes.
Okay.
But we do service a lot of other surrounding communities. We are a part of a rich athletic SAU 16 department where facilities are in high need. We're part of those feeder programs and systems that go up to the high school. I hear everything you're saying, I respect it, but being here for 7 years and the community asking for more for us to keep pace, another position.
And just to clarify, we do have a second person now, but they're part-time.
Yes.
So the ask is to turn that second person from part-time to full-time.
16 weeks.
And have you looked into doing any apprentice program work with,
I have a work study right now who works 8 hours a week.
okay. So,
I've looked in, I've had interns here, we've done work studies. I mean, I've looked through a lot of different options on how we can do it, but it's not sustainable.
okay.
Hello, Ward Byrne, Railroad East in Brentwood. I guess I'm gonna be the elephant in the room. I'd ask this budget committee where we're gonna make the tough decisions to cut. You talked about sustainability. Our tax rate is no longer sustainable at the rate it's climbing. And there are tough decisions to make. And, you know, I look at the budget and I see the warrants, and I know you folks have a tough job, but the people of this community are starting to have a real tough job paying our property taxes. And there needs to be cuts. Maybe a spending cap yearly, something in a positive note for the taxpayers. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. The taxes in this town right now are out of control. It cannot withstand this in every year going forward with increases. The next thing you know, everybody in town's gonna have a $20,000 tax bill plus. That's where we're headed. And I would encourage this budget committee to start cutting and keep what we need. There's a difference between wants and needs. And there's tough decisions, but the climate we are in right now, and our governor, for instance, has made a hiring freeze. She's shutting down to evaluate. Our federal government's slashing everything right now. Not that that's a good thing, I'm not saying that. But I think there needs to be a movement in this town to control some spending. And whether it's personnel or a plow truck or what it is, I can't say. I would like to say that we've spent money, and I know they say it's ARPA funds and it's this funds and it's that funds, but we built a pickleball court up there, tore out a ball field that my father and every father in this town volunteered to build when I played baseball 40 years ago, and it's gone. That was a John Olson Memorial Ball Field for my neighbor on Dalton Road. They got killed in a car accident. They tore it out and put it in a pickleball court. How did I find out about it? I drove up there and I saw that the ball field was gone. Like, who makes these decisions? Where is the John Olson Memorial now?
You know, we had the lower baseball, softball field. That was definitely a part of the thought process. We want to be considerate of the town's history and tradition, and that was something that was on the forefront before any decisions were made. But the Olson Field is now our lower deck.
I appreciate that, and I'm gonna piggyback into the fact that, all right, we have a new highway shed down there that is incomplete. We haven't finished the highway shed. It's vacant. They're not, the trucks that we built to put in there, or the building we built to put the trucks in there, and the office space is empty. The building is not occupied. Why is it being allowed to do projects and spend money when we haven't completed the ones that we've already invested our tax dollars in? That's insanity to me. Thank you.
Speaking obviously on behalf of the rec department, we certainly understand the climate that we're all in, but I also want to make it a point, at least from my perspective, that whatever we've put forth in front of the select board and the budget committee, we've always put forward a conservative budget. And we felt that this position was needed a few years ago, but we understood the climate then as we understand now. And it's one of those questions, is when is a good time? But from the rec department's perspective and where in the seat I have been in, I've always been cautious and aware of what we're presenting to the town.
Each of these warrant article items that we're talking about here tonight will come before the town, will be voted upon at town meeting. Here, we'll generate an opinion of the budget committee. We've already heard the opinion of the select board.
I would like to remind this committee that they don't have to support it just because the select board did. We are an independent body.
Absolutely.
If there's no further public comment, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
And I'm an aye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay. Jen, any order you want from here?
You want to just go back up to the beginning?
Yep.
So Article 1 is always for general municipal operations. And what you'll see here is just the budget that has already been approved by both Select Board and BudCom of $6,827,043. And I would assume it's a little bit of a redundant vote here tonight
No,
because
I don't
this,
think we need to vote on that. We,
I mean, I think probably officially we should, but this board already has approved that number in the past. But probably should support it officially to go on the warrant.
I'm not sure it's necessary.
It
to
might not
vote
be
either,
necessary.
but-
Yeah,
no,
if it's, you don't
no.
want to vote, that's okay. $8.3.
8.39.
8.39%. That's not correct. It's 8.39% over last year's budget. We'll move on to Article 2. Article 2, last year for the first time, we decided to take multiple capital reserve funds that are always funded at a fairly stable rate and generally always approved by the public with minimal amendments or controversy, and put them together into one warrant, mostly just to speed things up and increase efficiency of town meeting, so that we did not have to have 5 separate warrant articles, but instead could lump these. We did review with town council last year that lumping these together does not prohibit anyone in the crowd at town meeting from making an amendment to any of these numbers, which would then amend the top line dollar value. It just puts them all together into one warrant. So what you will see in this warrant here in front of you is the 5 capital reserve funds. We have more than this. Some don't need funding because they are at their target. For example, like our software replacement, CRF is not needing funding. There's the town-owned bridges is not needing funding. So some that you've seen funded over the past couple of years dropped off because the select board felt we did not need to fund those this year. But the 5 remaining that are on there is the CRF for information systems hardware. That is to replace computers and specifically servers, which are quite expensive, and we are due for a server replacement, I believe, in 2025. That is set at $30,000, which is equal funded from last year, where it passed at $30,000. The CRF for revaluation, I think everybody's aware that we are having our town revaluation this year. That's going to cost us approximately $155,000. And we had been funding that CRF at about $25,000 a year. We increased that at the select board up to $35,000 a year to account for some of the cost increases of the revaluation and to allow us to start building up for the next statutorily required reval in 5 years. So that was set at $35,000 compared to $25,000 last year. CRF maintenance of town buildings, last year that was at $50,000. We dropped that this year down to $25,000 because we felt we could get by with a lower number. So that is in there at $25,000. CRF fire vehicles, that last year was at, I believe, $50,000. I'm just checking that one. Yes, $50,000. We left that level funded again at $50,000. And CRF for public safety radios, we moved into this warrant this year. The public remembers this fund was created last year and was funded initially with $30,000. This fund allows for replacement of all police, fire, highway, or other public safety radios over time. So we elected to leave that level funded from last year at $30,000. When you add those 5 warrants together, you get a sum of $170,000, which I believe is just slightly less. I want to say last year, I think it was $180 was the total, but relatively in the ballpark of last year. And the select board did approve that for the total sum of $170,000 for those 5 CRFs as mentioned.
Maintenance of, excuse me, town buildings, do we know what the expenditures was for that in 2024?
Some of that got delayed. For example, the rec windows got delayed a little bit based on us having difficulties getting quotes. So the thought was that that was going to be expended last year, but is getting bumped into this year. Also, with our town administrator out, some things that we were anticipating taking out of that fund actually went into the budget. So like the mold remediation downstairs that we were planning to take out of that fund came in less expensive than we anticipated, and we had room in the regular budget for it. So we paid those bills out of the regular budget. So I think when I look at the town-owned building, let me just find it on here.
There's 125,000 in there now.
Correct, yep, and our target had been 150. So that's why we had asked for just the 25 as opposed to the 50, because we did not expend significantly out of that fund last year. What we have in front of us this year is the rec windows, which is in the ballpark of, I think, $40,000. And then if you look at the CIP, we had, I believe there was a furnace replacement for town offices that is in the next year or so. And I think there were some other potential upcoming costs. This is also one that we can use for any town-owned building. So we've used this before for things at Historical Society, things at fire station, anything that potentially needs repair or projects at any town-owned building, this fund can use. And that's why we did elect to leave it at 25, but to decrease it from last year.
Mhm.
Can you give the total amounts in the other CRFs and what the goals are for those, please?
Sure. So the CRF for information systems hardware, let me just find it on here.
96,000.
He's got it faster than me. 96,115. The goal for that is, at least on paper, 150,000. And so we were electing to put 30,000 more, which would get us up closer to that goal. And like I said, I think the servers are due to be replaced this year, so that will definitely be a deduction from that fund this year. And that's the main cost. I mean, there's costs of computers and equipment and other things, but the server replacement, my understanding is that is the main cost out of that fund. And then, do you want me to go through them one by one,
Yes,
Michelle?
please.
The revaluation currently has 152,000 approximately in it. So that's just less than the bid that we just received for 155,000 for this year's revaluation. And so the thought was to put 35 in there to both help us have enough to cover this year's reval and to allow us to start replenishing towards the goal. Our old goal for that had been 135,000. I would argue we probably need to increase that goal up to maybe 160, 175,000 based on the fact that that bill will be 5 years from now and likely higher than it is now. We didn't specifically discuss at the select board what to set that new goal at, but I think we kind of threw around something like 170,000 or something in that ballpark. And then maintenance of town buildings, I think we just discussed. The fire vehicles, emergency fire vehicle replacement has 364,000 approximately in it right now. The goal on paper for that fund is $1 million. And I'd have to have the chief here to really speak to that, but I think that is mostly for fire truck purchases and repairs. And so the goal was to just gradually build up that fund over time. And so we elected 363,916, just under 364,000, relative to the goal of 1 million. And then public safety radios, that has just under 32,000 in it right now. The goal for that on paper is 240,000, and we elected to ask for another 30 to go into that fund.
Having just replaced the radios like a year or two ago, that seems like an excessively high goal number.
We did talk about this at the select board, and the thought was that because that also would cover highway and police radios, and my understanding is highway is due for radios, and they had kind of got put on hold because of fire getting new radios, that we felt it was better to fund that, but we did have that discussion at select board that because we had just made that purchase, that that one might have had a little bit of wiggle room. However, given that it only had 30,000 in it out of the 240 goal, we elected to just leave that static at 30.
And the radios for all of these departments are all different, or are they the same?
I cannot speak to the exact type of radios.
I think it was just fire radios that were replaced last year. So the
Yes, it was
other first
fire is what
responders,
instigated the warrant initially, but the reason we named the warrant public safety radios is so that it would be inclusive of all radio needs and not just fire. And I was just looking back, yeah, last year was 1, 2, 3, 5. There were 5 CRFs in there that totaled 180,000. So this year it's 5 CRFs that total 170,000, just less than last year.
The same 5?
No, they're actually different. Last year was information systems, reval, maintenance of town buildings, fire, and town-owned bridges. So we took town-owned bridges out, we put public radios in. That is the change, and then modified some of the amounts. Any other questions for me about that?
comments, questions from the committee? If there are no comments or questions, is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second before we vote. Public comment?
Jim Burlow, Scrabble Road. $100,000 for a server in the cap reserve fund, and you want to add more?
I'm referring to what the town's prior goal for that fund was, which was 150,000.
Has anyone
I
looked into
do
the cost
not
of a server?
have in front of me
for
what the
4,500
cost of
people?
the server is.
One at a time, please. And that may be for more than one server.
It is. And it's also, for future planning for those being cycled over time. And so I'm just referring, Jim, to what the town prior goal for that fund was, which was 150,000. Even with putting 30 into it this year, it would still be below that goal.
Has anybody on any committee ever looked at what this town really needs instead of multiple servers? I'll move on. Your public safety radios, I'm going to argue again that the ambulance revolving fund can cover, is designed to cover public safety radios. We didn't need to establish last year, as I argued at the town meeting, a new fund to cover what was originally intended by changing in 2009 the ambulance revolving fund. And now you want to add to it. I think we need to resolve the actual usage of the ambulance revolving fund before we move forward and throwing yet more taxpayer money at another capital reserve fund with an astronomical goal in mind.
And Jim, you are correct that that CRF was amended with much broader language to allow for other fire and ambulance equipment. I don't have the wording in front of me right now, but I don't believe it would cover highway or police. And I think the concern was that the cost of the radios last year was around $160,000, I want to say. And that if that had been taken out of the ambulance fund, we would not have enough money in there to buy the ambulance, which was the original purpose of that fund.
How much was the ambulance that you purchased?
I don't have that in front of me. but that was the original purpose of that fund.
What's the
I
balance?
hear you, though.
What's the
You
balance at
could-
the end of
you
2024?
could take those out of that fund. But the thought was that that would then cause that fund to struggle to meet its original purpose of ambulance purchasing.
The taxpayers are struggling to meet these wish list amounts. I urge the Budget Committee to think about what these arbitrary amounts are that you're attempting to hit each and every year. And the taxpayers are getting killed. If this ambulance revolving fund doesn't have the right wordage, I urge our selectmen to manipulate it, get the correct wording in there, because I'm not 100% sure of what the 2024 end fiscal year balance is. But it's got to be pretty up there. We've got maintenance of town buildings. We've already got a lot of money in there. Adding 25,000 this year probably isn't going to kill you. Probably isn't going to kill anybody. The information systems hardware, adding $30,000 to a $90,000+ fund balance appears to me to be way too high for 1, 2, 5 service that you need for a town of 4,700 people. It's out of control. And you're hoarding, you're holding money, you're creating a battle that doesn't need to be fought if you just think about realistically, what are the goals versus what do we really want these funds to do? Thank you.
I do have the wording here. I knew I had it somewhere. I just had to go grab it from next door. So the wording from the ambulance fund as amended would allow for that fund to be used for fire, rescue, and medical services expenses, for vehicle and equipment purchases, repair and maintenance, supplies, contracts, training, and benefits. And we do currently use that fund for salary, training, benefits, equipment. The two most recent purchases we made for fire of the Lucas Auto CPR machine and the nitrous oxide delivery system were both funded out of that fund.
Is not a radio equipment?
Yeah, as I said, yes, you could buy fire or ambulance radios out of that fund per this wording. You could not buy highway or police radios with this wording, but you absolutely could, to your point. You are not incorrect. You are correct. You could use that fund.
I would argue that you're too narrow in that. We've created a fund in 2024 that does the exact same thing that the ambulance revolving fund can do.
Thank you, Liz.
Liz Faria, South Road. I had a question. The reval this year is supposed to be 155,000, right?
Correct. That's the bid that we have.
So what, and we have 152 in there. Why can't we just put, 5,000 in there and not have the other 30? for
We
this
could,
year?
but then we need to do another reval in 5 years, so we need to build that fund back up in 5 years. If the public decided to just put 3,000 in this year, it would just mean they'd have to put a higher value in the next 4 years to build that fund back
Well, I'm
up.
for that. But I would say maybe 5, just so you wouldn't be, down to nothing. But I don't think you need the extra 30,000.
So if the reval in 5 years were to cost, let's say,
Well, then we cross that bridge in the
175,000,
next 5
it would
years.
need 35,000 a year. So, or you could do 70,000 for a couple of years. If
Yeah.
That's up to the
I'm
public.
just
to
talking about this year, where we're already 8.4% above.
I hear ya.
So I don't think that's necessary at all. The other thing is, it was my understanding that we got 50 radios for the fire department. And even
That
if you
sounds
put
approximately
all
right.
the per diems and everybody and their brother together, there's not 50 people there. So is the extra, I don't know, maybe they have 30 or 35, but is the extra 15, can't those be used? I know that police might be different, but can't some of those be used for highway?
I can't speak to that, Liz. I mean, I know that Chief Byrd ordered what he thought he needed for the function of his
Yeah, I don't
department
know how
and
that
his
ever passed the
vehicles.
town, but-
So I can't speak to that exact thing without him being here, since he's the one that manages those.
Well, I think we need a more accurate count of how many people actually work for the town.
We know who works for the town, Liz.
Woodburn, Railroad East. I'm gonna back up a little bit here. I think we get kind of a trend going on here. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. The town budget in 2022 was $4,319,603. In 2025, we're asking for $6,827,043 without warrant articles. That's a 58% increase in spending. That's a upward trend that is out of control and not sustainable, again, as I said before, for taxpayers. And I feel like I'm falling on deaf ears here that we're not recognizing that people can no longer take these steep tax increases. It's not sustainable. And I don't know where you're gonna make the cuts or what's gonna be the cuts, but I fear you're gonna lose control of this town at town meeting and then everything's gonna get voted down. And then services that you wanted and that are necessary are gonna be chopped. I've spoken to a lot of people in this community recently and they're very upset with the tax bills. And they've had enough. So, and alls I hear is, well, we cut here and we're gonna spend it over here, and it's kind of smoke and mirrors. The increase doesn't lie over a 3-year span here. And there's been no restraint by the selectmen or the budget committee. Very little, if any. Well, it can't be any restraint because the number keeps going up. How do we hold the line? How do we put a tax cap on things so that people can sustain here? Something needs to be done. It just is not sustainable.
Is there a particular service or department that you would make the cut in?
I'm not saying cut in services. I'm saying I think we need to take a hard look at who we're hiring, what we're hiring, how we're hiring, equipment, everything, and make it ultimately, the selectmen and the budget committee has some form of fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. And a 58% increase in 3 years is anything but a fiduciary responsibility. It's absurd. It's not fair to the people that live here. I've lived here my whole life, and this is just out of control. And I don't know where the cuts are gonna come from. I'm not privy to all the intel of what's going on, but I do know that it is not sustainable. A kid that's lived here his whole life, grew up on Dalton Road, is gonna be forced out of here. And I had every intention of living the rest of my life here. And I don't know, when my wife and I retire, I don't think I'm gonna be able to afford to stay here. It's a sad day when my taxes, I own a house, and my tax bill's more than my mortgage ever was. That's insane. Thank you.
Not all the ears are deaf, Ward.
Letty Bedard, speaking on behalf of myself and not any board that I'm on. Yep, Letty Bedard, speaking on behalf of myself, not any board I'm on. Chair Jones, could you review for me what the proposed rough increase that we originally heard about in October was?
I can. I mean, I agree, the taxes are going up, and a lot of that is because of services like the fire department, and that we are trying to support the sustainability and survivability of the fire department. In the fall, before our town administrator had departed, we had a prelim budget sent to us that came from all the department heads that had an increase of around 15% over last year's budget. We did not feel that that was going to be something that the select board could support. So the select board, in particular, Letty and I, spent weeks cutting the budget and did cut $319,000 out of the budget to get us down to that 8.39%. We hear you. We hear all of you. I own 2 properties in Brentwood. I pay these exact same taxes as all of you. But I'm also the one that has to explain to the public why we need a sustainable fire department and a safe police department where people have double coverage and are safe when they're out on a night call. and why, as the public had very, very much supported in the past couple of years, double coverage for fire so that we would have faster 911 response times. So I hear you, these things cost money. And I very much appreciate that taxes have gone up. Inflation has also gone up tremendously, 22% in the past 4 years, which is some of these cost increases. I hear you, and we tried to trim everywhere that we could and did get that initial prelim budget down to what you see in front of you now, which is an 8.3% increase. That's a similar increase that the voters did approve last year. And we did the best that we could to trim it while still supporting necessary and vital town services. And everyone is right, it is a lot. I think some of these tax increases over the past couple of years have been filtered through Concord. There are things that the state used to pay for that they no longer pay for, such as retirement. And if you look at our budgets, the retirement lines in every single budget are a pretty hefty line. Those used to be covered in part by the state. The amount that the state covered dropped down and down and down and down over the years. And those costs have been moved from the state level to your pocket. And unfortunately, there is nothing that the select board can do about that. If you feel strongly about that, you need to talk to our representatives in Concord about those fees being passed on to the town level. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
And then some?
My other question was there something different about the process that happened this year than typically, and do you anticipate that happening again in the future?
Yes. So what happened differently this year is after getting to the bottom line number, after the select board went through every single budget with every single department, we then went through and cut, I believe, 24 budgets out of all of our budgets that are in this 19-page packet. And working collaboratively with those budgets, we're able to make those cuts. In prior years, there had been sort of a routine that if a budget was level funded, it was just kind of left as is. We actually went through and looked at each line, line by line by line, to see which lines maybe were a little bit overfunded, specifically in highway, where there's always a lot of wiggle room is left in highway because of just so much uncertainty about snow. And we were able to cut things down as much as possible. So what happened differently this year is after the budget process was done, the select board then made extensive cuts to our preliminary budget. Do I think we will need to do that next year? Not as much, because some of the lines that needed to be tightened, we've already tightened this year. So I do not anticipate that we would do the same thing, but I do think that that has been our goal, is if we look at a line and say that line was massively underspent, if there wasn't a good reason for that that made sense, that we were looking to tighten those up. And I really appreciate the departments who, some of them were uncomfortable with some of the cuts that we asked them to make, but they all collaborated with us. Some may not have been super happy with us. There's some people in this room who weren't super happy about their budgets being cut, but were willing to work with us and trust us that we would have enough money to fund the town. And so I guess the answer is yes and no. Will we need to do this process again? I mean, we're always trying to trim things where we can. I think sometimes the public fails to realize that the budget is a budget document, and we know we are unlikely to spend every single dollar in this budget, and we hope that we don't. Because if we spend every single dollar in this budget and there's just one snowstorm or one broken piece of equipment or one legal fee or something, we will have to go through emergency procedures to fund the town. And so we do understand that the budget always needs a little bit of wiggle room in it, but what we really worked hard to do this year is really shrink that wiggle room as much as possible, and we're able to do so to the tune of, like I said, about almost $320,000, because we did not want to bring a double-digit increase to the public, and we worked hard to keep it down. I do acknowledge that an 8% increase is a significant increase. I hope everyone will come to town meeting and hear from our town workers, particularly our fire chief, why some of those increases are necessary, and then vote. And that's how this process works.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you to both Letty and Jen for going through that budget a second time and through it line by line. Yes, sir.
Tim Stell, 351 South Road. Sorry to backtrack, because when we talked about the operating budget before, we never had a chance for public comments. I went to the selectmen's meeting last week, and I went for a specific reason. And the reason I went is because the way we present the budgets to the town, I think is very misleading. What we do is, and we just heard it on the operating budget, saying that it's an 8.4% increase over what was approved last year, not what we spent. So the tax bill that we got not long ago is obviously based on what the town spent, right? So now we're looking at, and take my glasses here, so we had $6,827,000. That's what we want for this year, for the operating budget, correct?
It's actually a little more complicated than that in terms of the tax bill that you got is what the town approved for the budget minus what the select board voted to pay down the tax rate. So it's a complicated number to pin down because it varies year to year. So what you said is somewhat correct, but also not correct. Your tax rate actually does not reflect what was spent. It reflects the total appropriations minus whatever fund balance the select board uses to pay down the tax rate. So it's a whole different ball of wax.
Okay, but still, all right, $6,827,000 is what we want for this year. Okay, and you said 8.4% over what was approved last year.
Correct.
But we will spend, according to the spreadsheet I saw,
Hopefully less than that.
$5,426,000. We are asking for a 25.8% increase over what we spent last year. That's a lot of money. So it's not 8.4, and I'm afraid that people at the meeting hear 8.4, and that's what they think it is. It's not. It's 25% over last year. The fire department, I saw Chief Bird's letter on Brentwood Talks. I am a big supporter of the fire department. I am. But they're asking for a 50% increase over what they spent last year. That's a lot of money, you know? So I ask you, because they said I should come to the BudCom committee because you are the ones that can make this decision. When we present this to the town, let's present it to what was spent last year, not what was approved last year. That is a better measure of what the taxpayers need to see. That's not the way I run my house. I don't run it on what I thought I was going to spend last year. I run it on what I spent last year. I'm sure everybody else does.
One of the things that happens when the budget is prepared and there are appropriations, those appropriations have to be funded at that time. That's a rule. So starting with that, and then the fire department is unable to fill 2 positions for a few months. We have a winter, a soft winter. We don't use as much salt. We don't use as many part-time plow drivers. And those amounts accumulate in the general fund, and they are in the general fund in October when it comes time for the select board to decide how much they have to retain in order to pay the bills for the rest of the year. And the rest of that goes to reduce taxes in that current year. So it's not like it disappears.
Oh, no.
It goes
Didn't mean that.
It goes to reduce the tax in the current year.
I just think we should be more upfront and talk about the fact that this is the budget. And if there are extenuating circumstances, talk about that. But let's just tell the taxpayers, this is 25% over what we spent last year. That's all.
I think you certainly can, yeah.
Understandable.
I think that's a valid point. I just think we just need to make sure apples and apples and oranges are being compared, because we know that the budget is likely a higher number than we will actually spend. The budget is meant to be the worst, it just sounds bad to say the worst case scenario, but the highest possible spend scenario. If we have the worst winter, if every employee works every day, if every employee that we think might have a child or get married or change their insurance does so, right? A lot of budgeting for a town is some guesswork, and you want to have some degree of a buffer. And so that's why we are able to pay down the tax rate, because there was extra money. So I hear you. You could certainly present those numbers if that's what BudCom decides to do, but we would just have to really explain carefully apples to apples versus oranges to oranges, because here we're really talking about budget to budget. But your point is correct, that the actual spend does not match the budget. That is correct. Yep.
And the last thing is you asked, where would you make the cuts? And without people throwing things at me, I totally agree what the gentleman said about a hiring freeze. I see a lot in here of taking full-time positions, part-time positions to full-time positions. Has our population increased that much in the last year that we should be, I think it was maybe 4 positions we were taking from part-time to full-time? Let's freeze them.
Thank you.
Liz Freya, South Road again. I just had one other question, which when we didn't have a town administrator, how exactly did you evaluate the positions, you know, whether they would get the 3%, supposed 3% COLA and 2% merit? How did you do that without so much of our staff?
We've spoken to this before in public. The department heads did their evaluations as they always do. And for the department heads that normally would have been evaluated by either our town administrator or chief of police, we set those at a flat 1% merit. So they got a 4% increase across the board for everyone. So some of the department heads actually got lower than some of their highly rated staff, and they were all amenable to that because we did not feel that it was fair to evaluate them in that circumstance. So they were all set. So it was all department heads and Jillian were all set across the board at a flat 4%.
Okay, and I'd just like to remind you, it's not a COLA if it's not the federal COLA. The federal COLA is 2.5.
It's the COLA that we adopted at the select board level.
If there's no further public comment,
Actually, can I make a motion? To the
Of course.
amendment?
amendment to the motion.
Yep, I would like to amend that overall number to $105,000.
By reducing which lines?
Hardware down to 10, revaluation down to 30, town buildings down to 15, fire vehicles down to 40, and the radios down to 10.
What was the fire vehicles, Michelle, that you were suggesting?
40,
40.
So it was 105, is that what you said?
correct.
If we do that, that moves the possibility of those expenses to next year.
I know. We're hearing a lot of commentary from the public that we can't do this. We can't keep doing this. We can't do this all at once. So I'm trying to make an effort to bring that down a little bit. I would also like the public to know that I did suggest that raises, that there be, that the raises be only federal, 2.5%. That request was, I couldn't even get a second on that. So there is someone up here trying to think about y'all and myself and trying to bring these numbers down. But I don't get that support from this board.
We have a motion.
I was just going to say, I'm wondering if I'll even get a second tonight.
That's what we're looking for.
The period to sign up for election has already passed. So if your name is on there, good for you.
So it looks like I won't even get a second. Y'all should remember that on election day. Who's in your court?
So what I'll say to that, Michelle, is there are about 15 people in this room. There will be 10 times that many people at town meeting. So I would prefer to put forward what I think the town needs and let those 150 people make an amendment rather than 15 people make an amendment. And that is why I'm not going to support that second. If the public votes to amend this at town meeting and approves that amendment, obviously, I will support that fully because that is the vote of the legislative body, but that is why I'm choosing not to second that tonight.
I'm not asking the public to second my motion, I'm asking this board.
I'm explaining why I'm not seconding that though, because I would rather have the voices of more people than just the people in this room. I think they deserve the right to, everyone deserves the right to speak to these at town meeting, and they will get that right.
And personally, I don't love the idea of just kicking the can down the road. If we're gonna need to fund these funds at some point, I would rather do it incrementally over time. And then, you know, if something comes up and we maybe need to spend money a year before we think we were going to have to, you know, we're not looking for all 170 for a revaluation the year before the revaluation, where you don't really have a choice to say, oh, now I don't want to fund it. Or, you know, we have to not fund something else like a fire truck or a loader or something comes up that same year and we're having to decide, oh geez, these are both huge budget items. I think funding 20,000, 30,000 at a time to me makes sense. So that's why I wouldn't second that.
I understand what you're saying too, and I'm not saying not to fund anything. I'm just trying to lower them a little bit.
No, I respect where you're coming from with that, but just I'm explaining why personally I support the warrant article as written.
There being no second, we come back to the article at 170,000. All in favor?
Aye.
No,
And I'm an aye.
Ready to move on?
Ready to move on?
So Article 3 is a CRF for multipurpose municipal building. We chose to put this one as a standalone because this topic does tend to generate more conversation and interest. So this is a warrant that came directly from the request of the Municipal Building Committee, who voted at that committee to put this warrant forward. That would see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a $25,000 increase to the existing multipurpose municipal building capital reserve fund. And so we brought that forward to the select board and that was supported. The goal of this is because that committee was not ready to bring an actual bond for a building to the public this year. The hope is that that would happen at town meeting in 2026 and that these funds would be used to bring detailed plans with costs to the public for what they would like to see happen with either a standalone police station, a multi-purpose municipal building, or a standalone police station with the potential to future build or add on. And so that committee did ask for an additional $25,000 to be added into that fund.
what is the current fund balance?
I will tell you in 1 second. It has 144,587 in it currently.
And do you happen to have an amount that has been expended for this project thus far, as
The only spending that has come out of that is the $10,000 that was paid to the company last year that helped us work on preliminary site review and plans. And I do not think that bill has actually been invoiced to us yet. So that fund that has 144 would be 134,587 after that bill is paid. But to my understanding, that is the only bill that has been paid out of there per that committee, or will be paid out of there.
and is there a goal for that fund, or are we just?
I think their goal was around 150,000, and the thought was that if there was excess funds, they would roll those funds right into the design build process of the building, so that if needed, they would even modify the wording of the warrant article as we moved forward, so that those funds could roll into the next step of the planning for the building, is my understanding per that committee.
So did that get renamed from the police facility?
Correct, yeah, it just didn't get updated on the trustees of the trust fund spreadsheet. We'll have to have them update that wording.
Okay.
And there was some questions that came up about when that fund was renamed. Does it obligate the town to build a multi-purpose building? No, it does not. It just gives the town the option to build a multi-purpose building, but it would allow the town to build any municipal facility. So a standalone police station is still a possibility. A combo building is still a possibility. A multi-stage build-out would be a possibility. And those are the three possibilities that committee has been talking about the most often.
Questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I can motion that.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there a comment?
Yes, I'd like to circle back, just one, you didn't get me on the
Wardburn,
Ward Burn, Brow Road East.
still.
I find it highly offensive to have an elected official say it doesn't matter that the people that came out tonight have an opinion on what's going on here. And we took the time and we've expressed our,
Ward, that's not what I said. I said that.
can I finish?
But I just want to respond because you're speaking to me. That's not what I said. I said I preferred to allow the entire legislative body to weigh in. Your opinions are 100% valid, and I appreciate you being here, and we've listened to your comments, and we'll continue to do so.
Well, you're not.
I am
Because
listening.
you
to
didn't have the courage to even vote on a member on your board. You didn't even have the courage to take a vote. You wouldn't even respond to it.
the courage to take a vote. I
She
explained
made a
why I
motion
chose not to
and
second a motion.
She made a motion to an amendment to cut
Yep.
money that we in this room have asked for,
Sure.
and you didn't even have the courage to take a vote.
It wasn't up for a vote as it wasn't.
But we
seconded.
have to have a second in order to take a vote.
That's what I'm saying. Nobody even had the courage to give Michelle a little bit of dignity to take a vote. You're not even a second on it. What's going on?
I explained why I chose not to second it. I think
Because
that was
we
pretty
don't
clear.
matter.
That's not what I said.
you
Ward.
said.
No, it's not
It
what I said.
100%
You can
is.
put words in my mouth, but that's not what I said.
Well, let's play the tape back, because that's what you
I
said.
said the number of people in this room is not fully reflective of the 3,000 voters in Brentwood, and that I prefer, if these numbers are going to be amended, that be discussed with the whole legislative body at town meeting next month. You guys will all be there too. You will have a voice then, just like you have a voice now. I'm not discounting those of you here, but I'm saying that I preferred not to second that, to leave it as is and let it go to the legislative body. And so I hear you. It doesn't mean I necessarily have to agree with you. And I think I explained why I chose not to second that motion.
This is in my opinion, and Jackie doing a terrific job running the meeting, but that display of not seconding a member's motion is a pathetic form of elected officials not doing their due diligence here. I think it's ridiculous. Any person on that board should be able to make a motion, either second it and vote it down, or to do what you did is just, it's a slap in the face of taxpayers, I'm sorry.
Okay, we have before us the multipurpose municipal building, $25,000 for the capital reserve fund. All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
And I'm an aye.
The next couple should be relatively quick and easy. So Article 6 is to see if the town will vote to discontinue the Solar Capital Reserve Fund. This was the fund that was put in place to purchase the solar array. That purchase has now happened, so the intent of that fund is completed. And so this warrant would allow that fund to close, and any funds remaining in that CRF with accumulated interest would move over into the solar revolving fund, which is a new fund that was created last year for maintenance of the solar array.
Is there money left in there?
There is $11,000 principal, but in total, there's about $23,974 in that, which would move over into the new solar maintenance fund. It's actually more than we anticipated because I think the array came in a little bit less than we were anticipating, and the stock market had been nice to us over the past few years, so that fund had grown a little bit more than anticipated, and we do have a little bit more left in that fund than I think we thought we would.
This isn't necessarily pertinent to this article, but what, do you have any information on what that array is earning us or
Not in
utilizing
front
for
of
the town?
me, no.
Could you have that for town meeting, please?
Sure. It covers essentially all the electricity bills of all the town-owned buildings, I can tell you that. And does save us significant money, but I don't have the dollar values in front of me. So this CRF is really just to, or this article is just to close that one fund and roll the money over into the other fund. One of the benefits of rolling that money over is that we will have that money in that fund and won't likely have to go to the public in the next couple of years to put any more funds in there, depending on what the maintenance costs are of that array. So it will allow us to hopefully not have to see that get funded for at least a couple of years as we get a sense of what the ongoing maintenance costs of that array are going to be. And the new fund, this wasn't asked, but in case anybody's going to ask it, the new fund currently has $0 in it. So this would put money into the new fund.
Committee questions, comments? If there are none, I'll make a motion for that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Public comment? Seeing no public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I'm an aye.
The next one is even more straightforward. It is to close the library amphitheater CRF that was put in place to build the library amphitheater. That has been complete. That fund has $0 remaining in it, and this is just housekeeping to see if the town will vote to discontinue that fund, which is no longer needed.
Technically, I don't think we have to vote on that as a budget committee because it has
Oh,
no.
correct, you don't.
It has no financial. impact.
Correct. Yep, that actually is correct. I was just sort of going down the list. So that one you don't need to. I think, I'm not sure if the same is true of Article 9. It doesn't raise and appropriate funds. It just moves funds. So I'm not sure whether you need to vote on that. Maybe I'll read it out and you guys can advise if you think you need to. This is a warrant that came from the planning board called CRF Master Plan. And this is to establish a new fund, which would be the Master Plan Expendable Trust Fund under RSA 3119A for the purpose of updating the town's master plan. And it would raise and appropriate the sum of $8,500 to be placed in the fund from unreserved fund balance. So essentially, last year's budget had $8,500 in it. It wasn't expended because the planning board very much feels they would like to do the whole master plan at once rather than doing chapter by chapter, which is what they had been doing. So this warrant essentially asks us to move the money from last year's budget into this fund so that the money can then accumulate and they can do the entire master plan at once. And so it does not have, it does not require any amount to be raised from taxation because this amount was previously raised by taxation last year in the budget.
I'm not sure that's properly worded then because it says to raise and appropriate.
I think this is the wording that Mark Kennedy told me he had pulled off of other similar warrants, that it needed the raise and appropriate term, but then it also needed to specify where that was coming from. I don't I asked the same question, why does it need the word raise? Because we're not really raising it. And once you folks finish voting on this, we're gonna run it by either DRA and or town council. So if they need to wordsmith it a little bit, they will. But the intention of this was to move this from unreserved fund balances. Actually, maybe we can ask Brian, because this is the type of warrant the school does
I just
every
pulled up
year.
the school board warrants.
Yeah.
And yes, there
What does it look-
are warrants to
Yep.
fund 2 capital reserve trust funds from unreserved fund balances, also use the raise and appropriate
okay.
language. So
I thought they did. It's kind of a weird, like, legal wording.
So do you think that triggers that we need to vote on it?
I
or-
think, as Liz Barry is fond of saying, even if it comes from an unreserved fund balance, it does affect the bottom line.
Yeah,
and that it
it's still
does
taxpayer money.
going forward.
Yeah.
So I think it would be appropriate to vote on it, even if it
I think so
doesn't
too. It involves
raise the
moving funds from one place to another. 100% you can.
So so you're taking that money out of the planning board budget or out of the general budget?
Well, technically, those budgets are all closed, so it's out of the general fund. So you'll see, it says here it's from the unreserved fund balance. But it is essentially money that was raised by taxation last year and not spent. And so the planning board wanted to do it this way rather than raising the money again. They left this out of their budget this year. So essentially, you could think of it, instead of putting an $8,500 line in their budget, they zeroed out that line in their budget this year and instead are going to take this out of the general fund and put it in. I'm assuming that we would then see this yearly, or I haven't talked to the planning board, but I would assume that we would see this warrant multiple years until the fund reaches sufficient amount for them to do the entire master plan.
Do you know the cost of doing the entire master plan?
Not off the top of my head, but I wanted to say it was in the realm of like $30,000 to $40,000. But I'm sorry, I don't know. Letty, can you speak to that? Am I in the ballpark correct?
I think it's literally whatever 5 times that number is, because we're gonna do it in 5 years-ish.
Oh, 5 times
Okay.
500?
So it was in that ballpark of like that's $42,000. So that was sort of my gut instinct, is it was around that much. And general, the warrants that we do for other things are usually straight raise and appropriate. And so planning board chose to do it this way, which is what the school does. And this is a legally appropriate way to do a warrant. And that's what the planning board felt most comfortable. So this comes directly from them and they voted on this. They could have done it as full raise and appropriate, but then it would have just raised taxes this year. And they did not want to do that, is my impression.
So is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Public comment?
And thank you, Brian, for looking that up, because I thought it was correct, but it is a little weird.
Liz Faria, South Road. When the school does it, they're doing it for the next year. So if there is leftover, that's not what you're doing this
No,
time,
the school
right?
does it the same way. When their budget season closes, they have money left over and then they put that forward into capital reserve funds. It's exactly the same.
They,
Isn't it, Brian?
you see what I'm saying? You do it when we vote in March. You say, if you have this left over, and then we'll do them in these orders, because sometimes you may not have the 40,000 or
Correct.
whatever left over.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
But that's not what
Yeah,
you're doing.
because
You're
they're on a summer fiscal year, correct.
Right, but your last year is already closed. The school does it ahead. You're doing it behind, if I understand.
I guess theoretically that's true.
I'm
The
not
actual
sure that's
mechanism.
allowed.
It is allowed. The timing is different, but the intentionality is exactly the same. There's unspent funds from year prior that are put forward into a CRF. It's one of the, there's only a few legal reasons that you can put a warrant for, to move unreserved funds, and putting them into a capital or an expendable trust fund is one of the most common ones and is the one that the school does
So
pretty
when
much
does
every year.
did last year's close? Last year's not closed yet?
So some of the expenses are still being cleaned up, but technically the appropriations lapse on December 31st, that last day of the budget year.
And you're sure that this is legal, the way this is being worded? I still wouldn't think it would be raise and appropriate. I would think it'd be transfer, but I didn't think you could do it
That's the-
after closed. I thought you had to.
That's Mark Kennedy researched this when he brought this warrant to us and advised us that this was the correct wording, but like I said, we will double check it with DRA and council to make sure it is legally correct.
Seeing no more public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna vote nay simply because I don't think that language is right. I'm not opposed to.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to the idea, but I can't support that without feeling good about the language.
Okay.
Since it's going to be reviewed, I will vote yay.
Who is the motion and second on that?
Kat and Brian.
Thank you.
And that's it. 9 warrant articles.
Nine warrant articles from the select board, and now, Brian, we have two.
Two
From the
warrant
school?
articles from the school. So this committee has already approved the school budget. At the time we did that, we were not ready to bring forward warrant articles, as we've previewed just now. If there are funds unspent funds at the end of the year, we typically move those into 4 different reserve funds. I sent an email to the chair earlier in January. I believe he forwarded it to the entire committee on or about January 9th or 10th in that time frame. So we have 4 reserve funds, one for maintenance that has a target balance of $150,000. It currently has a balance of just over $152,000. So we are not asking for a warrant article to put any funds there. There's a safety and security fund that has a target balance of $50,000, has a current balance of $52,112. Not asking for funds there. At least 2 other reserve funds, one for special education. That has a target balance of $250,000. That is a significantly higher balance than the others. That is the estimated cost of an out-of-district placement for a child with special needs, should that need arise, and that's the reason we have that target. The current balance there is $197,020. The proposed warrant article is $20,000 to add to that fund. The last reserve fund is the technology fund that has a target balance of $50,000. That has a current balance of $10,000, and the warrant article would contribute another $10,000 to that reserve fund.
And to Liz Faria's point, given that these are done and you have a summer ending budget, if you did not have the funds, do the warrants become moot? Is there language in there that
So
says?
the fund uses, the funds, if there's unreserved funds, they will go to the reserve funds in the order of the warrant articles.
Okay.
So there's $30,000 in warrant articles there. Let's say there's $25,000 left, then $20,000 would go to the special ed fund and $5,000 to the technology fund. If there was $10,000 left, then $10,000 would go to special ed.
Gotcha.
And nothing would go to the technology fund.
Gotcha.
Let's take them one at a time. Is there a motion for Article 2, Special Education Capital Reserve Trust Fund, $20,000?
Motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Public comment? Seeing no public comment, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Michelle, did you vote?
I said aye.
Now the technology for a $10,000 contribution. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And I'll second that motion. Public comment?
Liz Faria, South Road, what's the technology budget in the school budget?
Technology budget is for computers and things of that.
No, I mean, how much is in your budget this year for coming up the proposed budget for technology? Like, why do we need this fund in addition?
So we have, the upcoming year, we have $114,637 in computer services. That's a decline from last year's.
Is that a
budget
person
of
or is,
11.75%.
I would assume that the wording of this warrant probably clarifies what it can be used for. That might, I don't know if it's the same or different than what you already have in your budget.
Established for technology costs at Swayze Central School is it.
So it's pretty wide.
So it's pretty broad.
Yep.
so there's only one technology line in your budget? There's not software, hardware,
I'm looking at, I
computers?
was looking at the overall summary first before scrolling down into the smaller print to try and find it. So
Okay.
I'm not gonna be able to answer this in 15 seconds.
Well, I was just wondering why, I don't know, when, did you start this last year, the technology? I wasn't aware we had a technology budget in there. And
No, it's not a brand new fund, I
So,
don't believe.
why wouldn't they
um,
just ask for the money they needed in the technology lines?
Letty, you appear to, do you mind if I phone a friend, as it were?
Prior select board,
Prior
prior
select
school
board-
board
school
member.
member?
School board member?
Yeah. And so the computer services in the budget covers computer service aids, computer service supplies, software, new equipment, and replacement equipment. But I think the routers, I think, is the primary reason. Yeah.
But then that doesn't sound nearly high enough. I'm just saying that, I guess, I always feel like if you need it, you put it in the operating budget. If you want it, you put it in a warrant article, and so.
Okay.
That might be true, Liz, but usually with CRFs, it's the opposite. It's this is a CRF. So it's something that you think you're gonna need in the future and you're trying to save up money over time rather than just have a lump sum every 5 years or so.
Okay, seeing no more public comment, all in favor of the contribution to technology of $10,000?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Anything else from Swayze, Brian?
No, not at present.
What's happening with the solar panels?
So solar panels are installed. You cannot see them from the road, but they are up there. The thing we've been going through lately is coordinating the bond. So we did meet in January and talk about the bond. Go back to my update that I sent you. Sorry, here. So as of the last update I sent you, there was not quite final connection to the Eversource grid. We have a pre-application for the federal rebate that has already been submitted. That has to wait for final connection to the grid for submission. The details around when the rebate will be received are really vague because there's a lot of confusion among the bond council, other experts around when and how those rebates are paid. So we don't have that information yet.
How far from connection to the grid are we?
As of our last meeting, we were very close. It was really just testing before final connection could happen.
I mean, is it something that'll happen in a week or a month or?
I do not know. I would hope fairly quickly, and it may have already happened, although I haven't received notice of that, but I can't say.
Could you message me when you hear that it's connected? I mean,
Yes.
Particularly, you know, if it happens before the public hearing, it would be nice to be able to mention that.
Yes.
It's active at that point.
I have a quick question to do with the solar panels. Real easy one. So I have solar panels on my house on a 12 pitch. Snow comes off fairly easily when the sun hits it. That's not quite a 12 pitch that I don't believe those solar panels on the roof are at. How are they being cleaned? Are the custodians going up and cleaning those off after every storm? Because if not, they're not going to generate much energy.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that question, but I can look into it further. Good question. Thank you.
Okay, Jim Hedjar has asked to be able to make a presentation tonight, and now's the time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know it's been a long night for all of you, and really,
Do you want to come over here to control your?
Hook it up so they can. Letty knows how to do all the chords. I don't want to mess it up.
Just so you can control your.
while they're doing that, Mr. Chair, I'll just say thank you again. This will be really easy. Oh, yeah, we know how to hook it up. Again, this will be pretty, I'll try to go pretty quickly, but I think there's some good information in here that I wanted to share with all of you. In the past, I know the Budget Committee has done comparisons with other municipalities. I took it on my own this year to do this similar thing. And I started off, this first chart just shows how I chose the similar municipalities. Basically looked at anything that was within Rockingham County. Then I sorted by population. I went plus or minus 1,000 for Brentwood. So basically between 3,700 and 5,700 people. That basically yielded 12 towns, including Brentwood. Northampton and Rye I removed because their valuations were so much higher than Brentwood. Basically, I looked at if you were plus or minus 30% of Brentwood. So that left us with 9 municipalities, which is pretty good. I was going to tweak those things to make them wider if I had to, because if I couldn't get 5 municipalities, I didn't think it would make a good comparison. The next slide just shows some of the numbers that were used, I believe it was last year, by the Budget Committee. If you look, the populations of some of these towns, only 4 of them, of those towns, only 4 had similar populations within 1,000 of Brentwood. And of those 4 towns, if you look in the column where it says valuation difference to Brentwood, only Fremont and Danville really had similar valuations. And that you have like towns like Stratham, Rye, Hampton, Exeter, all had valuations that were over twice as big as Brentwood, 100% larger. And while you can compare us, obviously, to any town in New Hampshire, in the New Hampshire DR database, I believe the more similar a town is, the better the comparison will be. So next chart, I just took the total tax commitment. And again, I'm not going to explain. You folks know these terms better than I do, but total tax commitment. And I looked at a per capita on that. So Brentwood's $3,956 per person, ranked in the 88th percentile. We were the second highest in per capita, while we were in the middle, the 44th percentile in valuation per capita. Only Greenland was higher at 44.24. Danville was the lowest at 27.97. And basically, if you average all 9 communities, not including Brentwood, they had an average total commitment of $16 million, which is almost $3 million. Brentwood's is almost $3 million, or 15% higher than Brentwood's $18.9 million. So we were like 15% higher than that average of 16.
Jim, did you do any adjustments to any of these, or
This is
valuation of like number of pupils, school, because we know obviously school is the single biggest contributor to our budget. This really doesn't account for any of that.
Did not. And the reason why I did that is, as you'll see, I really did not do anything. The next charts are all going to get into town. I did not look at, I didn't have the time to.
Yeah, I think, I
But
appreciate
yes,
that. It's just,
for this number, you're
it's
right.
hard
this
to
includes
compare
schools.
these towns
Correct.
based on the inherent differences.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
So the next slide, and I'm just showing here, I went back, the next 2 slides are 2023 and 2022. In '23, it's a little bit weird because we kind of had that anomaly where we used $1.7 million of fund reserve to offset taxes. And if you carried forward the normal or the previous year's 933,000, we would have been at an 88% per capita. We dropped to 84% if you include that 1.7 million. And then in 2022, similar, we were at 88%, the 88th percentile. So in summary, on total, bless you, on total tax commitment for 2023, 2024, we pretty much were always the second highest total tax commitment per capita. Now I went down one level from total tax commitment down to just the town tax commitment. So again, no schools in here, it's just town. Brentwood, $833 per person, is in the 77th percentile, or the third highest in per capita, while we are in the middle, or the 44th percentile, in valuation per capita. Only Greenland's 1146 and Chester's 1073 are higher. Newton was lowest at 495. The average of all the other towns is about $3.4 million, which is about $620,000 or 16% higher than Brentwood's $4 million. Excuse me. Yeah, the average of the other towns were lower. We were $620,000 higher, $4 million, sorry. Next chart is, again, 2023, same thing. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, just that if you take that anomaly out of the fund reserve, you'll see the 77% shows up again in 2023. And in the next slide, that's 2022 data, same thing. Brentwood comes out at 77th percentile. So in summary, for 2022, 2023, and 2024, we were always the third highest total town tax commitment per capita. That's, again, if you exclude that anomaly of the 1.7 million offset in 2023. Now I took it next step lower than that. So total town tax commitment, obviously, include, revenues are out of that, offsets. I just went right to total appropriation. So I show both 2022 and 2023. For all of these next slides, the 2022 data was taken from the New Hampshire Public Financial Consortium. The chairman put me onto that website. It's really powerful. Unfortunately, they have not entered, the state has not entered the data for 2023 or 2024 yet. And I actually was working with one of our state reps trying to find out why that hadn't been done, but we haven't gotten the answer yet. But so for 2023, I manually went through and took the town reports from all 9 other communities and pulled the data manually out of the town reports. So total town appropriation, if you look at 2022, just for point of clarification, our $5.7 million that's there does not include the $3 million conservation bond that we had that year, because honestly, that would just throw us looking really, really high when in fact that's a bond, and that $3 million not only shows up in appropriation, but it also shows up in a revenue, so they actually offset each other. So to keep it kind of balanced with everybody else, I took that $3 million out, as well as you can see, I think that year Chester had a $2.5 million CIP. But anyways, I'll just focus on in 2023, Brentwood per capita was $1,345 per person. We ranked the 88th percentile, second only to Greenland's $1,497 per person. Newton had the lowest per capita at $859 per person. If you look at the average of the similar towns, it came out to be about 5.2 million. Brentwood was at 6.3, which is 1.1 million or 18% higher. From that, I looked at pretty much the top departments that are in the budget, just to kind of get a feel at going down to the departmental level at the appropriations. And again, this is 2022, 2023. I don't have the 24 data yet. I was going to get that from the town reports of these other communities. So in 2022 for the for 2023, Brentwood's police was $236 per person. Again, we were at the 88th percentile, second only to Greenland's $241. Nottingham had the lowest per capita at $131 per person. The average of the other similar towns for police department appropriation was $893,000. Brentwood's 1.1 million was 214,000, or 19% higher. Notice that in both years, Brentwood was the 88th percentile. Then I looked at the fire department budget. Similar, again, this same analysis. I combined ambulance and fire so that if a town uses ambulance, it would be in there. If a town doesn't, you'll see it's showing as 0, like ours. In 2023, Brentwood was $216 per person. Again, that's the 88th percentile, second only to Greenland's $269. Fremont, our neighbor, had the lowest per capita ambulance and fire appropriation at $61 per person. In 2023, the average of similar towns is $558,000 for an appropriation. Brentwood's 1.01 million was $445,000, or 45% higher. Notice that in 2022, we were the highest expenditure appropriation for fire, and we were at the 88th percentile in 2023. And just for an important note, this exact slide I had shared with the chair, and he and I both met with the fire chief to review this, and he did put together a summary that I assume he's going to be presenting at the budget hearing. He did turn it in, but because I wanted him to see this, that he's asking for a lot of money this year, I think a 25% increase. And I told him I would think that that might put us at 100% for sure with these other communities.
Jim, do you know for sure that the services that we provide are similar? Did you look at call rates? Did you look at the impact of the nursing home?
Okay, so
I'm
that's.
assuming, no, because you can't.
I
right?
don't,
It's
I don't
just
have
numbers.
that, but that is, I will say this, the chief did tell us that when I asked him, well, why is it that, say, our neighbor Fremont is spending $65,
Sure.
right? And we're spending 216.
Right.
He said, well, I have more calls.
Yep.
And I did. I asked him, I said, well, maybe you'll have call data for us at the budget hearing, because I asked him, like, it does seem odd. Again, this is just
Yeah, the
numbers.
tell
Like,
part of the
why
story.
would
Right.
Brentwood have more calls than them? They have the same amount of people, same basically valuation. He did say that he first said municipal complex, prison, and nursing home, to which I told him, well, if you bring that up at budget hearing, I'm going to get up screaming because they don't pay us. So I don't understand. If we are paying $216 per person and you know,
They
Fremont's
pay us for, like, if we go on a call.
they pay for the, I would think they pay for the ambulance, but again, I don't think they fund the town of Brent. I wasn't aware that they funded the town of Brentwood.
Right, but
any
they
money.
pay the same way that, like, my insurance would pay if I called to my house.
Right,
Like,
but-
they pay for the services, but
And
correct.
maybe we need to have the discussion with the chief, because I don't know his budget as well as you
Sure.
do or he does. But he told me that ambulances is kind of kept separate anyways, that it kind of makes money on its own. And that this is fire that he's talking, this is fire mostly, that this $1 million that's here is mostly fire and not ambulance. But again,
Yeah, it would be really, interesting to hear. I think that's what's so hard with these numbers, is they tell a story.
absolutely.
it's-
well,
it
and
tells
and that
part
my
of the
summary at the
story.
end, I absolutely,
Yeah.
I will say, yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of
It-
moving parts behind those numbers that you see up there.
And to me, if you're at the top, you're at the bottom, it deserves to be looked at.
Sure.
Like, well, we know.
Yeah, I
why.
mean, the numbers are what they are.
Right.
So the chief had intended to be here tonight, but something came up, and I don't know if Katerina has anything like a call frequency report, or? Yeah. Did you have more?
I did.
Beyond?
Do you want me to
beyond
just
this?
keep going? and
Let's
just-
let's
Yeah,
just
why don't I
deal.
just- I don't have that much left anyway.
Okay.
I really don't. And again, just to keep it consistent, I did go through highway. This is another one that I would kind of look at, because if you look, our average, the average of the similar towns is $876,000. But Brentwood's 660,000 was actually 33% lower. We're actually the we were actually the second lowest.
We may
appropriation.
make that up in trucks in the next
Well-
10 years.
Well, again,
Well, but also remember that our highway budget is broken in two, and your own,
and I got highway and street, so
but like, do other towns put snow and ice into highway? So this may be comparing apples and oranges, because I would be surprised if we would be low.
I know he does a really good job. I mean, we all know that. I would probably ask, like, why
Because
are
our
we so
total
low?
highway budget is more
Right.
like 900,000.
Yep.
Not 595,000. So this is, if you include snow
Well,
and ice.
that was 2022, and
Yeah,
that-
that's,
that's-
I think you're only reflecting part of our budget, so it's hard to know how, if you're comparing apples to apples.
yeah, there definitely were two account lines that are in there from the state, but again, so that's highway. Library, in 2023, Brentwood's per capita was $68 per person, and that's the 88th percentile, second only to Greenland's $103. Fremont had the lowest per capita library appropriation at $35 per person. The 2023 average of similar towns is $218,000. Brentwood's $318,000 was about 32%, $100,000 higher. In 2022, we actually were the third highest, and we went up to the 88th percentile in 2023. Now, the rec budget, just to be honest, I mean, the rec kind of showed up further down the list of departments, but I know Andy had spoken to me, actually, the rec director, about his warrant, so I pulled this data for him actually on the fly. And what's interesting on this one, this is, I think what you're saying, when you do these further deep dives, you kind of can figure things out, right? Because these are just numbers, but if you look at the 2022 data, I left it alone. Our rec comes in at 77 percentile, right? So we're pretty high compared to the others. However, when Andy reviewed these, he said that actually all of these towns that are highlighted in yellow, Candia, Danville, Fremont, Greenland, and Newton, don't even really have a rec department. So that's why they're so much lower. So just for 2023, I took out those towns from the analysis, and sure enough, Brentwood showed up at the 50 percentile, directly in the middle. So if you ignore towns without rec departments in 2023, the average of the similar towns is 98,000, and Brentwood is 95,000. So again, this just shows that if you kind of look at the data, sometimes it's not what it appears to be.
Sure.
Just some closing statements, okay? I think these comparisons are very useful in evaluating how Brentwood operates relative to other very similar towns. The specific data does not identify anything like any issues. It does not make any judgments on the town or on any of our departments. I think the data is very valuable in identifying areas that need to be more deeply analyzed to understand the reasons why we are so much different than other similar towns, whether we are much higher or much lower in any budget area or department. For example, one would expect that a town with a similar geography, similar population, and a similar valuation would have a similar town budget appropriation. Yet the comparison data presented shows that Brentwood ranks with other similar towns as follows. In population of those the 9 communities, we were at the 44th percentile, or pretty much right in the middle at population. On valuation, we were in the lower third. We were at the 33rd percentile. Valuation per capita, we ranked in the middle, 44th percentile. Now, based on that, on the total tax commit, we were the second highest, the 88th percentile. On the town tax commit, we were the third highest, 77th percentile. For town total appropriation, we were the second highest, 88th percentile. Police, fire, library appropriations all ranked the second highest, 88th percentile. The highway ranked 22nd percentile, or the third lowest. And then the rec appropriation ranked at the 50th percentile, which is right in the middle of all those similar towns that fund a rec department. My suggestion would be, Mr. Chairman, is that, after town meeting this year, that the Budget Committee should lead the efforts to investigate these findings further and then make recommendations based on the results of those investigations. And again, thanks.
That makes sense. There's a lot of data.
And I wish we
There
would have
could
had
be-
this earlier, to be honest. We talked about this.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the truth of it is I swore I wasn't going to do this ever again until I opened my tax bill. And that's when I decided, as you know, I started talking more to you about this and working on the data, so.
Okay,
Can-
let's go
can I
back to,
can I make an alternate suggestion? So as somebody who has been living and breathing the town budget for months, I think that this data is interesting, but there's so much behind it that we don't know that I don't think matters to us. For example, some of these towns have more businesses, less businesses, more exposure to 125 and the policing needs of that. And then there's the nursing home, and then there's how many kids in the school. And I think you could deep dive into this. What I would rather have people do, if people in this town want to deep dive into something, deep dive into our 19-page budget. That would make more sense because it's all Brentwood specific. And so I'm not saying that these numbers don't have value, because I think they do. They tell a story, but I think the story that they tell is such a complicated story that we could talk to all those towns. We could try to break out all the little things that make those towns different from us. But I would really encourage people that this 19-page document of our budget is going to be more specific to Brentwood. And if you want to cut Brentwood taxes, we have to cut Brentwood people or services. So if people want to make cuts, I would encourage you to get your hands on this 19-page document and go through it line by line like some of us have done, and actually think about specifically what you would like to see cut in our town. And we can certainly use, neighboring data to guide us on that. But if we're gonna spend a lot of time and effort and thinking and muscles on this, it's just my personal view that energy by the BudCom would be better used on our actual circumstances in town, because I think there's just so many moving parts in these other 9 towns that are so different from us that we could get ourselves like down a rabbit hole rather than just looking at our actual budget. So that's just the feedback. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Jim, but just listening to you, that's what I'm thinking of, is that yes, this is super helpful, but it's in.
I think when I hear people say, or I felt I'm paying, why am I paying so much in taxes? And you look at our total town appropriation, and we're much higher than, and again, these are very similar municipalities. They have the same amount of people. The valuations are very similar. When you see that an appropriation on a department is much, much higher than other neighboring municipalities, I think it warrants having that department head explain why are we so much higher. And again, I've met with the fire chief. Lieutenant Doty is meeting with me. He wants to talk. He wants to review this week. I think they know why we're more expensive than those communities. And I think when you hear people saying our taxes are too high, where are we going to cut? I think that's where you have to start to look at is, okay, what are they doing in these other communities that are allowing them to do it more? And I guess the word is efficiently, because it's cheap, it's lower cost than what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't think like those other communities are having like big, like.
okay, this is a very big subject.
It
and-
definitely is. So,
Yeah,
and I
stay
do,
here,
I
just
do agree that.
Stay here,
like,
relax a minute.
It's just a number.
Let's go back to fire. And Katerina, did you have something you wanted to, about call frequency or whatever?
Sure. As I said, I would rather have the chief fully explain it. And he was gonna come to the meeting. We did, at minimum, looked at the actual emergency calls that the departments do, because that's one of the variables. I agree with what Jen said, that there are just so many moving parts. There's different SAUs. If you look at the overall budget, I know he went down to all the individual ones. So for fire specifically, simply going to the number of calls. So in 2024, we found every town on your list except for Newton, and we're almost double except for 2 towns. So 1,030 calls this year. Second highest was Northwood, 841, Candia, 618. Everybody else was at 500 or 400. And even those numbers are just big picture numbers. Not sure how everybody counts their calls. It should be somewhat uniform, but it might not be. Service calls, et cetera, things like that. So that's just one small piece of this. The other piece was I saw that you were trying to be as accurate as possible and figure out both fire and ambulance budgets, and where you found separate ambulance budgets, you combined them and had a total number. Just looking at the numbers themselves and knowing how the departments function, I'm not sure, how accurate it is for each town. Some towns have ambulance service within the fire, so you have dual certified people and they do fire and ambulance. Some towns split it up. Some towns contract private ambulances and they just have to pay fee for using that. So there's very many different approaches to that. There's more, but I'd rather have Chief elaborate.
Could you send me the numbers on the,
Yeah.
yeah, could you email
Yes.
that to me, and I'd like to send it out to our committee here.
Yeah.
And again, I just want to say
Thank
thank you because, sorry. Yeah, this is the second time we've talked, and again, this data was sent to them, specifically preparing for questions that they may get at budget hearings, so thank you.
Can you put this up on the screen? Do you have that in your, this is I emailed this to you.
I just shut
Yeah. Oh,
I just
okay.
shut it off, sorry.
Okay,
My
okay.
computer's off.
I mean,
I have it printed.
just for the record.
That's 2022 though, right, Jack?
Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
2022. Everybody, you've all,
It was in the email.
the whole committee has seen these. And this is a comparison which I did somewhat similar to what Jim has done. I put everything on per capita, but I wanted to compare Brentwood's tax rate to our neighboring towns. So I went Danville, Fremont, Epping, Kingston, Exeter, Newfields, East Kingston, Hampton, Kensington, Stratham, Rye, and Northampton. And I picked those towns starting with the SAU 16 towns, and then I added another 6 towns that were essentially adjacent to us. In other words, our neighborhood, so to speak. And then instead of tax rate, I rated them on tax per capita and listed them. Brentwood comes in just lower than the median. In other words, it depends on what towns you pick, but we know, these are towns that we know. And
Jack, that's from 2 years ago, so
that's,
do we know?
as Jim said earlier, I mean, that was the latest information available
Oh, okay.
from that source. And
Gotcha.
And we don't disagree on the numbers because for that year, both he and I have it, but have them, excuse me, identical. I also picked Northampton, Rye, and Stratham and Hampton because they had low tax rates. But it turns out when they're compared on a per capita basis, their taxes are higher. I mean, you can see
Because
it.
their valuation
You can
is
see
so
how
much
they-
more.
How
Yeah.
they turn out. So I think that's important in the sense that these are our neighbors.
Yeah,
And,
and again,
Do we have
as I
geography?
tried to explain on the chart, it's fine. You can compare against whoever you want, but if you're comparing against Hampton, and Hampton has a valuation of $3.2 billion that year, which is 437% larger than us. Again, you start to say, well, how similar is a community, even though they're close by, when you're trying to compare like appropriations and spending, you're just not, I feel like you're not getting an accurate assessment. So to say you're in the middle, of course you can be in the middle of, but that's why I didn't pick, communities way up north either, so.
But it's.
Anyways,
They're different, but it's also on a per capita basis, so.
And I'm just going to say again that I think we should be comparing ourselves to ourselves. And so if people want to make cuts, they need to tell the select board what services they would like to cut. So I know this comes up at town meeting, and I've even heard people say, well, that's not our job to decide what to cut. But if you're asking your town elected officials to cut things, we need to know what you want cut out of our budget. And it really doesn't matter how we compare to other towns. And so I'll just continue to reiterate that concept.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Can I just,
Thank you,
so
Karen.
I think it's ironic that you just said that, Jen, because every time people want raises, it's always compared to other towns, and I always say we shouldn't compare to other towns, we should do what's best for Brentwood. Thank you, Jim, I know you did a lot of work, I can't believe you went actually through town reports to find that information.
It was a lot of work.
That's dedication, but thank you. I mean, numbers you can make data say whatever you want it to say,
Exactly.
so,
Exactly.
and I mean, I had that conversation with you before. What are you trying to say with some of the documents you're presenting? So, I mean, I think it's important to look at different ways of analyzing things. So, I hope that this board does do that in the future.
Okay, our next meeting is at the rec center, at 6 o'clock on February 10th. And that's followed immediately at 6:30. Is the public hearing at the rec center.
Why are there 3 meetings listed here, Jack? 6 to 6:30 is us,
yeah.
and then 6:30 to 7:15 is the public.
Yeah, well,
Is-
yes, and then 7:15 to 7:45, we.
To have another
This
session.
go back.
this
Yep.
committee
Yeah.
Gotcha.
has to sign some things.
Gotcha, perfect.
And now, if necessary, if we have to have, and I hope we don't, a supplemental public hearing, I'm saying a week later, that would be February 17th at 6 o'clock, and we should do that here in the town office, not at the rec center.
Okay.
Okay, again, normally we have public comment at this point. Is there any further comments from the public?
They're commented.
Thank you all for your comments.
Wait.
Oh,
And-
wait,
Hey.
wait.
Uh,
She's not commented out.
I was wondering if the meeting at the rec center is going to be streamed or recorded in any way, so people who can't attend will be able to follow along.
It was last year.
It was last year, and I presume it will be this year, but it depends on who's in charge of.
Andy's
Andy?
usually our AV guy.
Andy,
So I think he helped us record it last year.
can you bring that up with Andy?
I can certainly
and
ask
just
him.
make sure
Yep.
he's going to be there.
Yep.
Burlow gonna do something?
Hmm?
Didn't we
Mhm.
talk to Jim about that?
Okay. Thank you all. Our meeting is adjourned.
Just, the chair just made the decision. We didn't even vote.
Take notes.
I could do that? I didn't know I could do that. I thought I had to take a vote.
How do we shut it down? Oh, red is off and green is on.
Michelle, I saw your text.
Yeah, you walked in, I'm like, okay, the answer's yes.